need more proof that this is Donald Trump's Republican Party? Well, Republicans are using the same tactics today that helped Trump get elected in 2016 by throwing anything and everything they can at Democrats, even if it's not true, especially if it's not true. Flooding the zone with excrement, as Trump strategist Steve Bannon once said. Republicans paint Democrats as promoters of critical race theory, which isn't even taught in schools. They say defenders of LGBTQ rights are trying to sexually groom children. They say a highly qualified Supreme Court nominee, soon to be justice, is soft on sex offenders. They say Democrats are in favor of an open southern border. And through all this, Democrats just don't really push back. I mean, with the Supreme Court's conservative majority now poised to overturn the landmark Roe v. Wade decision and undo half a century of women's rights, what did Democrats do in response? They scheduled a Senate vote to codify Roe that was never close to passing. Hello again, filibuster. There wasn't even a discussion at Senate Democrats' meeting on Tuesday of doing away with the filibuster to protect the rights and health of half our population. Democrats just don't know how to fight, a point actor and activist Sophia Bush made very well on this show just the other day.
I don't understand why Democrats are showing up to a shootout with a penknife when the Republicans have been showing up to a shootout with an Uzi. We are not playing the same game here.
She's right. Democrats are playing by the old rules while Republicans have obliterated them. Nowhere is this more evident than in the party's painfully slow and timid approach to Republicans and 1-6. Take this guy, John Eastman, a former Trump legal advisor, already known for his infamous six-step plan on how Mike Pence could supposedly steal the election for Trump on January the 6th. Now we've learned that Eastman reportedly urged Pennsylvania state legislators to manipulate the vote count and toss absentee ballots in order to overturn the results there and give Trump the win in that key swing state in 2020. The emails were obtained by the 1-6 committee from the University of Colorado, where Eastman had been working as a visiting law professor. Not anymore. In them, Eastman is said to have told Pennsylvania Republican lawmakers that changing Pennsylvania's vote would, quote, provide some cover to Republicans for changing the state's slate of electors. I bet it would have. Eastman reportedly urged lawmakers to manipulate the vote count by, quote, discounting each candidate's totals by a prorated amount based on the absentee percentage those candidates otherwise received. Eastman said that would provide a significant Trump lead that would bolster the argument for the legislature adopting a slate of Trump electors. Yeah. A reminder that Biden won Pennsylvania by more than 80,000 votes. 80,000. And if you or I had done what John Eastman did, allegedly, wouldn't we be in prison by now, or at least indicted? Yet nearly 18 months later, this guy is still sauntering around as the insurrection he reportedly helped plot rolls on. It's maddening. I've asked it before, and I'll ask it again. What on earth are the Democrats doing? What on earth is the Department of Justice doing? And where, oh where, is Merrick Garland? Joining me now to talk about all of this and more is former Alabama Democratic Senator Doug Jones. He's also a former U.S. attorney and was a leading contender for the job Merrick Garland now holds, Attorney General. Earlier this year, President Biden tapped him to guide Judge Ketanji Brown Jackson through her confirmation process for the Supreme Court. He was seated behind Judge Jackson throughout the hearings and somehow kept a straight face through hours of ridiculous Republican questioning. Senator, thanks for coming back on the show, and props to your straight face through some of those Marsha Blackburn, Ted Cruz questions. We'll come to Judge Jackson in a moment. Let's just start with some news. You're a former prosecutor. You have sent people to prison. If you were the U.S. Attorney General, would you be taking action against John Eastman?
Well, I would certainly be in the middle of an investigation, and I believe that the Department of Justice is doing just that. I think the signals that are coming out of the department is that they're being both methodical and efficient, but they are leaving no stone unturned. This is not just about violence at the Capitol, but about what went on before, during, and after that violence. And so I think that there is a lot going on in the department. These things, Maddie, just take a while. You cannot rush an investigation like this. What's ironic about all this to me is that clearly John Eastman, in my view, with all of these messages, all of these texts, was asking folks to commit the very kind of fraud that Donald Trump and his allies seem to be pointing at Democrats. This whole thing has been about election fraud, but it has been people like John Eastman and other lawyers that has seemed to be the biggest culprits of potential fraud in this election.
Well, maybe you are seeing and hearing different signals to the rest of us, but I'm glad you have such confidence in the DOJ. I'm trying to have that confidence. Let's see. Before you were a federal prosecutor, you were a staff counsel on the Senate Judiciary Committee. I get that committee work can be long and arduous. A lot happens behind the scenes that the rest of us don't see. I get that. But do you understand why so many Democratic voters are so frustrated at the slow pace, not just of the DOJ, but of the 1-6 committee, when it comes to holding the ringleaders, the politicians, to account? It's been 16 months since the attack on our Capitol, and in 8 months, the Republicans are likely going to shut the 1-6 committee down. Time is not on our side here.
No, you're absolutely correct. And I absolutely can understand the public's frustration with that, Democrats' frustration with that. But you cannot rush these things. And I have been through so many investigations, not these kind of political investigations. But the fact of the matter is, number one, the January 6th committee is moving very, very quickly, very efficiently. They've been able to do things. And I would suspect that the DOJ is doing likewise. The difference is they work behind a grand jury secrecy rule that you cannot see. This is a massive criminal investigation. There's been 700 plus indictments just so far. And any big investigation like that has to work its way up. You have to subpoena records. DOJ doesn't have the same kind of subpoena power. Only the grand jury can do that. And I certainly understand the frustrations, but we want to get it right. The DOJ and the public needs to make sure that they get this right, they go through and leave no stone unturned before they seek an indictment from a grand jury.
Do you wonder, as I do and many others do, why Merrick Garland hasn't, for example, indicted Mark Meadows yet for contempt of Congress, even though it's been 5 months since Congress made a criminal referral to the DOJ on Meadows?
Well, I think when you're dealing with the chief of staff of the President of the United States, there are a lot of issues that you have to look at. I understand from the committee standpoint what they would do, but there are certain privileges, and there's got to be a parsing through a lot of different issues when it comes to the chief of staff. So I don't think 5 months is that unusual, but it would seem to me that we should have an announcement one way or another. If it is not going to be an indictment, then they should go ahead and announce that and announce one. If there's going to be one, let's see how it moves.
Let's talk abortion. The Democrats' Wednesday vote to codify Roe v. Wade never had a chance at getting enough votes to overcome a Republican filibuster. Have a listen to what you said to me about your view of the filibuster earlier this year on this show when you were talking about voting rights. Have a listen.
The filibuster was designed not to obstruct, but to give the minority a voice. And if you can change those rules, as we advocated in our piece, change those rules and give the minority a voice in amendments and a voice in the legislation, I think we could get this voting rights thing done. I really believe that, without eliminating completely. But we got to change the rules.
Is that still your position on the filibuster? Should Democrats eliminate or reform it, not just on voting rights, but on fundamental issues like abortion rights, too? I mean, just a few months ago, they made a filibuster exception for the debt ceiling. Why for that, but not for codifying Roe?
Yeah, I mean, my position hasn't changed. I'm really not in favor of getting rid of it, but I do think there has to be some reform. The problem that you've got right now as we move toward the midterms and the end of a Congress, by the way, is that if you go into the kind of reforms that I was talking about at that point, you're going to be, the Republicans will be able to stall all things on the Senate floor, including nominations, including other substantive work that we have to get together. So I think it's going to be really difficult to get the votes to do that. You know, there has been some talk about perhaps after the elections trying to figure out a bipartisan way to amend the filibuster. I don't know if folks have really been looking at this issue.
There's no, come on, Senator, there's no bipartisan way to amend the filibuster. You know as well as I do, there's no Republicans are going to sign on to anything.
I didn't say that it would happen. And I don't think that it will happen, but certainly there is at least some discussions about changing some rules. There are a lot of rules that I think could be changed that could help move this process along. The filibuster is one of them, but I don't see it happening on the abortion issue. It is just, it's too hot a topic. If it didn't move on voting rights, which is something that was very on everybody's mind over the last 6 or 7 months, I can't imagine it moving on the abortion issue.
You were there every step of the way through Judge Ketanji Brown Jackson's successful confirmation process, sitting right behind her in the hearings. I have to ask you this. Why do you think it was that it was really only Cory Booker, the only Democrat, to forcefully defend her, from claims that she is soft on sex offenders, ridiculous false claims, and to push back against Republican bad faith actors on that committee. Why don't members of your party take a stronger stance on some of this stuff? Why was there no mention of Republicans like Jim Jordan, Matt Gaetz, former House Speaker Denny Hastert, who went to prison for child sex abuse? You defeated Roy Moore. You literally ran against and defeated an accused child molester. And yet we allow Republicans to create this ridiculous moral panic about pedophiles and groomers.
Look, Maddie, I was one that argued strongly that we should push back on facts. But you push back on the facts, which I think Republicans did. Corey had a more emotional discussion. He brought everybody home about the inspiration that this nomination posed. There was pushback every day from the White House, from the members of the Judiciary Committee on the facts. You start pushing back by simply calling somebody else a name and pushing back on their issues and problems, you're going to lose too many people. Judge Jackson ended up with incredible popularity around the country. And it was because, I believe, in part, that we pushed back on facts. We continue to elevate her and her qualifications and the inspiration that she was and is, and not getting into the same kind of gutter that we saw the Republicans get into. I didn't think that would have been appropriate then. I don't think it's appropriate now. Let somebody else have that fight. We need to push back on facts and lift our message, and that's what we did.
I take your point, and I admire it in many ways, but the reality is that your party, to millions of Americans, is now being defined by your opponents as being pro-groomer, pro-pedophile. Opponents who, as I mentioned, have their own issues with the likes of Roy Moore, Denny Hastert. I don't think it's wrong to point that out. But we're almost out of time. I've got to ask you this. Do you think Judge Jackson's successful confirmation will help Democrats in November? Is it going to energize turnout in places you need turnout, or is that not enough?
Yes, I absolutely believe it will, because it was the fulfilling of a campaign promise. Democrats can deliver. They stayed the course. They provided the kind of inspiration to millions of people. And I don't think that the Republicans are defining us as pro-soft on pedophiles and child molesters. Defunding the police and other things. And we've got to push back on those facts as well. But Justice Jackson's confirmation, I think, is going to be an inspiration for a lot of people that this is the kind of party that we have.